At 54, I had finally stopped apologizing for the life I'd built. Then my son showed up at my front door with his new girlfriend, 2 weekends worth of luggage, and a business proposal I hadn't asked for. Before I'd even put the kettle on, she told me, very kindly, very carefully, that a woman my age, living alone in a house this size, should probably think about simplifying. I smiled. I said, "That's an interesting thought." I did not say what I was actually thinking. What I did instead was wait, and watch, and spend one very productive Thursday night at my kitchen table with a strong cup of tea and my laptop. By Friday morning, everything had changed. Let me tell you exactly how it happened. My name is Loretta Marsh, and I did not come by this house easily or quickly. I spent 21 years married to a man named Gerald, who was not cruel in any obvious way. He was just the kind of person who quietly occupied all the space in a room, until there was none left for anyone else. When our marriage finally ended, the settlement was fair on paper, and not particularly fair in practice. And I moved into a rented apartment in Guelph, with a second-hand couch, and a very clear sense that I needed to figure out who I actually was, without someone else's opinions filling every corner. What I found, once the quiet settled in, was that I was pretty good at things. I had spent 2 decades managing our household, our finances, Gerald's business, entertaining, the kids' schedules, all the invisible work that people forget to count until it's gone. I put those skills to use. I took a job with a property management company and turned out to be very good at it. 7 years later, I had my broker's license and my own small firm. 3 years after that, I bought a house in Prince Edward County. Not enormous, not flashy, but mine in a way that nothing had ever been mine before. A farmhouse built in the 1890s with wide plank floors and a strip-around porch that caught the evening light in a way that still makes me stop whatever I'm doing and just look. My kids had grown up and found their lives. My daughter, Vera, lived in Vancouver and called every Sunday without fail. My son, Oliver, lived in Toronto, 45 minutes from me, and called when he remembered, which was less frequently, and always with something he needed. I loved Oliver. I want to be clear about that because nothing that comes later makes sense without it. He was 31 years old and genuinely charming, and he had spent most of his adult life leaning on that charm the way some people lean on a railing. Constantly, a little carelessly, trusting it to hold. He had good instincts and poor follow-through. He had changed careers twice in 5 years. He was the kind of person who was always about to do something impressive. I had been hearing about Tara for about 4 months before I actually met her. She was, according to Oliver, exceptional, brilliant, driven. She worked in finance, he said. Something to do with investment and restructuring. She had her own condo in the annex. She was serious in a way that Oliver clearly found both intimidating and magnetic. When he called to say they were coming for the weekend, I was pleased. I made up the guest room with the good linen. I put a bottle of County Pinot in the fridge. I was honestly looking forward to it. They arrived on a Friday afternoon in early October, just as the light was going amber over the fields. Oliver came through the door first, hugging me the way he always did, briefly, warmly, already moving toward the kitchen to find something to eat. Tara followed a half-step behind him. She was attractive in a precise, deliberate way. Hair that looked effortless and wasn't. Clothes that were expensive without being obvious about it. She extended her hand and smiled and said, "Loretta, it is so wonderful to finally meet you. Oliver talks about this property constantly." "Property, not home. Property. He's mentioned you as well," I said, which was true, though he had mentioned her mostly in superlatives and I hadn't gotten many concrete details. "This drive-in was incredible," she said, still smiling, her eyes moving over the kitchen in a way I filed away without reacting to. I had no idea this part of Ontario was so underutilized. Underutilized. I poured tea and did not say anything. Oliver, cheerfully oblivious, had already opened the Pinot. That first evening was pleasant enough. We ate dinner on the porch, which Tara said was charming, in the tone of someone complimenting a child's drawing. She asked careful, intelligent questions about the history of the house, the lot size, the year it was built. I answered all of them. She seemed to be doing arithmetic. Oliver went to bed early. He had always slept well, anywhere, under any circumstances, which was one of the things I genuinely admired about him. Tara and I sat on the porch for another 20 minutes with our wine, and that was when she said it. "Loretta, can I ask you something? And please tell me if it's too personal." She set her glass down with both hands. Do you ever think about whether this house is the right fit for where you are now in your life? I looked at her. I only ask because Oliver worries. You're out here on your own, and a property this size. The upkeep. The isolation in winter, it's a lot for one person. She paused. I work with a lot of clients who've found that simplifying at this stage actually gives them more freedom, not less. A smaller place, a condo maybe, somewhere with community around you. And this house, I asked? She smiled. It was a practiced smile. A property like this, properly managed. Historic farmhouse, county location, strong short-term rental market. It could generate real income for you, for your retirement. We could look at the numbers together if you're open to it. That's very thoughtful, I said in a voice that sounded like genuine consideration. She relaxed slightly. I just think there are options people don't always know to look for. Oliver and I would want to make sure you're protected. Protected, I nodded. I poured more wine. I did not tell her that I had spent 7 years in property management and 3 more running my own firm. That I knew exactly what my house was worth, and what a short-term rental could generate, and precisely what properly managed tended to mean when the manager was someone you had met 4 months ago. I did not tell her any of that. I said good night and I went upstairs and I thought about it for about 20 minutes. And then I opened my laptop. The next morning, Oliver was up at 9 and asked if I had any of that good coffee. I made a pot, put out fruit and toast, and was perfectly warm and normal and said nothing about what I had found the night before, because I hadn't found it yet. I had only started looking. Tara came downstairs at 10 in a cashmere sweater and told me the room was so comfortable and the light in the morning was genuinely lovely. She had her phone in her hand. I noticed she was photographing the kitchen. For what? I asked pleasantly. Oh, just for my own reference. You've done such a nice job with the space, Oliver said. Mom's great at all that stuff. All that stuff. I smiled. They went for a walk after breakfast. Down through the property and toward the water, which I noted because nobody had asked if that was all right. And I also noted which direction Tara's camera was pointing. When they came back, Oliver was glowing from the air, and Tara had a particular satisfied energy that I recognized from years of watching people fall in love with a property they had decided to want. You must get incredible sunsets here, she said. Every night, I said. It's one of the things I bought it for. Something flickered across her face. I kept mine easy. That afternoon, while they were in the village at the farmer's market, I sat at the kitchen table and opened my laptop and got to work. Tara Fenwick. Her LinkedIn was easy enough to find. Senior associate at a firm called Fenwick and Caldwell Strategic Investments, which sounded established but had been registered in Ontario only 14 months ago. The firm's address was a unit in a commercial co-working building on King Street West. I noted that. The next thing I found took me longer but mattered more. There was a small piece in a Barrie newspaper from 2 years ago. A community interest story about residents of a seniors development who had entered into a property management arrangement that had not gone as described. The agreement had promised rental income from their properties, which the management company would handle. The income had not materialized. Several families had lost effective control of assets they thought they still owned. The management company named in the article, Fenwick Property Solutions Inc. I searched the Ontario Business Registry. Fenwick Property Solutions Inc. had been dissolved 11 months ago. I searched Tara Fenwick specifically. She had been listed as director. I sat with that for a moment. Then I kept going. There was a woman named Helen Kowalski mentioned in the Barrie piece. The one quoted most extensively. The one whose name appeared in the community meeting notes that a local resident had uploaded to a neighborhood forum. She was 68 years old, recently widowed, had owned her home outright. The article described her as still trying to understand what happened to a property her late husband and she spent 30 years paying for. I found her email address through a local seniors advocacy group she was listed as a member of. I wrote her a careful, brief message. Then I started on the second thing. Tara had been in a professional partnership before. I found it through a business filing cross-reference that took me an embarrassing amount of time to locate, and that I was grateful I knew how to look for. A man named Colin Reese. They had co-directed a numbered company together. The company had been involved in 3 property transactions in the Muskoka area between 3 and 4 years ago. All three had been purchased significantly below assessed value from owners who were elderly, recently bereaved, or both. Colin Reese now had a separate active company. The two of them were no longer listed as associated. I wrote him a message too. Then I called a friend of mine. Her name is Janet. She is a real estate lawyer in Picton, whom I have known for 15 years. And I told her what I was looking at and asked her what it was called. Legally. Loretta, she said after a pause. What she does is consistent with property fraud targeting vulnerable owners. Depending on the specifics, it could also engage elder financial abuse provisions under the criminal code. Who would I report this to? She told me. We talked for another 30 minutes. By the time we hung up, I knew exactly what I was going to do and in what order. Oliver and Tara came back from the village at 5, carrying bread and cheese and a jar of local honey, and they were laughing about something, and Oliver put his arm around Tara's shoulders, and I felt a very complicated set of things all at once. I finished it. I had to. I made dinner. I was a good host. I opened the second bottle of wine. Tara talked at length about the short-term rental market in the county. Occupancy rates, platform fees, seasonal adjustments. With the fluency of someone who had done this before and was enjoying the performance of expertise. Oliver listened and nodded. I listened and took mental notes on what she already knew about this specific property and where she had gotten it from. After dinner, after Oliver had retreated to the living room with his phone, and his deeply consistent ability to absent himself from anything that required sustained attention, Tara helped me clear the table. You know, she said, her back half turned to me, rinsing a glass. If you ever did want to explore options for this place, I could put together a proposal, something informal, just to show you the numbers. I'd be interested to see that, I said. Wonderful. She turned and smiled, genuinely pleased. I'll put something together tonight. We could look at it over breakfast tomorrow. Perfect, I said. I'm always up by 6. She went upstairs to work on her proposal. Oliver fell asleep on the couch, which was also entirely consistent with his character. I went to the kitchen table and finished mine. Helen Kowalski had replied. Her message was 2 paragraphs long. The second one ended with, if what you're describing is happening again, I want to help. I have everything documented. I've been waiting for someone who would actually listen. Colin Reese had also replied. His message was guarded but informative. Cautious in the way people are when they have been careful to put distance between themselves and something they regret. He confirmed enough. By midnight, I had filed a report with the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. I had forwarded the documentation to the Ontario Securities Commission, which Janet had identified as a relevant body given the investment framing of Tara's pitch. I had sent Helen Kowalski's contact information to the investigator whose name Janet had given me. I had prepared a document, clear, factual, organized, that laid out the pattern. Fenwick, Property Solutions, the Barrie residence, the Muskoka transactions, the dissolved company, the new company, the 14 months, the pitch that had been made to me that evening, and the documentation that connected them. I printed it out. I paper-clipped it. I left it on the kitchen counter with a sticky note on top that said, Tara, I put something together as well. I thought we could look at both over breakfast. Then I went to bed. I slept well, I usually do. I was up at 5:30. The coffee was ground and brewed and the table was set, and I had made scones because I am, in fact, very good at feeding people, and I see no reason to stop doing it on someone else's terms. Tara came downstairs at 6:15 looking composed and prepared, a folder of printed pages under her arm. She stopped when she saw the document on the counter. She read the sticky note. She picked it up. She didn't open it yet. Good morning, I said. Coffee, please? Her voice was even. She was good. I'll give her that. She sat down. I poured. She set her folder on the table and placed the document beside it, and looked at both for a moment. The way you look at 2 doors when you don't know what's behind either one. Then she opened mine. I did not hover. I got my own coffee and sat across from her, and watched her read the way you watch the sky when you know weather is coming. The first page, the Ontario Business Registry records for Fenwick Property Solutions Inc. She turned to the second page. The Barrie newspaper article with her company's name in the third paragraph. The third page, Helen Kowalski's name and the summary of what had happened to her. The fourth page, the Muskoka transaction records. The fifth page, the CAFC report confirmation number. She closed the folder. She set it on the table very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands aren't completely steady. Where did you find this? She asked. Public archives, I said. Business registry, local news, court documents. The internet is a very thorough place. Loretta. She looked at me directly, and I'll give her credit. Fatude. She didn't flinch. I think there's been a real misunderstanding here. My previous company ran into complications that were genuinely difficult and not at all what. Tara, I said gently. I filed the reports last night. The CAFC, the OSC, and I've passed Helen Kowalski's contact information to an investigator at the Ministry of Finance, who was already aware of the pattern. My name and documentation are part of the official record now. Anything else you'd like to say about misunderstandings should probably go to them. She was quiet for a long moment. The coffee is very good, I said. Because it was, and also because I had earned the right to sit in my kitchen and say small pleasant things. I heard Oliver on the stairs. He came into the kitchen still half asleep, hair uncombed, looking the way he had looked at 12 years old on school mornings. He stopped when he registered the energy in the room. What's going on? I looked at my son. 21 years of his childhood, his scraped knees, his school plays, his first heartbreak, his bad decisions, the way he had cried at Gerald's father's funeral and thought no one saw him. He was not a bad person. He was a person who had found someone very compelling and hadn't looked closely enough at what was underneath. Oliver, I said, sit down. There are some things about Tara's professional history that I think you should know. He sat. I told him. Tara said very little. She tried twice to reframe things. The Barry situation had been misrepresented. The Muskoka transactions were legitimate. But Oliver had woken up properly now, and I watched his face do the math in real time, piece by piece. His jaw getting a little tighter with each one. You photographed the property, he said finally. Not to me. To her. For reference purposes. You measured the outbuilding on Saturday morning. I saw you from the window. She didn't answer that. You asked me on our third date whether my mother would ever consider selling. You said you were just curious about the market. The room was very quiet. Oliver looked at me. How long have you known? Since Thursday night, I said. I needed to be sure before I said anything. He nodded slowly. And the reports? Filed and confirmed. He looked at Tara. His face was doing something complicated. I need you to leave, he said. Now, please. She went upstairs without a word. She was efficient about it. I suspected this was not her first departure of this kind. She was back down in under 15 minutes with her bag packed and her expression arranged into something between wounded and professional. She did not look at me. She looked at Oliver. I genuinely cared about you, she said. Oliver said nothing. He held the door. She left. We heard her car on the gravel and then nothing. Oliver stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the driveway, and I let him. Then he came back to the kitchen and poured himself coffee and sat down at the table. His scone had gone cold. I put another one in front of him. I should have looked more closely, he said. You weren't looking for something to find, I said. She was very good at making sure there wasn't anything obvious. You found it in one night. I knew what to look for, I said. I've been in property for 10 years. I've seen versions of this. He was quiet for a while. Outside, a crow was making a tremendous fuss about something in the ash tree. The light was coming in sideways through the kitchen window and landing in a stripe across the old plank floors. My kitchen, my floors, my crow, for all practical purposes. Mom, Oliver said, I'm sorry that I brought her here, that she didn't get anything, I said. That's what matters. She tried. People try things, I said. The question is what you do when they try. He stayed for the rest of the weekend. He helped me stack wood on the back porch on Sunday morning, which he had not done voluntarily since he was 17, and we made soup from the vegetables I had in the garden, and we watched the light change over the field in the evening, and it was, quietly, unexpectedly, one of the nicer weekends I'd had in some time. Helen Kowalski called me on Tuesday. Her voice was steadier than I expected. She had spoken to the investigator that morning. The case she had been trying to get someone to take seriously for 2 years was now formally reopened. The documentation I had provided had connected it to a newer pattern the Ministry of Finance had already been tracking. I didn't think anyone would believe me, she said. I believed you the moment you replied, I said. And I suspect the investigator believed you too, once the pieces were in front of her. Why did you reach out to me? she asked. You didn't know me at all. I thought about that for a moment. Because what happened to you should not have happened, I said. And because the same thing was about to happen to me. And I wanted to understand exactly what I was looking at. She was quiet, and then she said, "Thank you." 2 words, plainly said, and they landed with a weight that surprised me. Oliver called me that Thursday. He had done his own reading since the weekend. He asked careful questions about what the documents showed, and I answered them as honestly as I could. At the end of the call he said, "I'm going to be better at this. Looking closely at people." "Good," I said. "That's a useful skill. You've always had it." "I've practiced," I said. "It helps when you pay attention." The Ministry of Finance investigator called me 3 weeks later. The file on Tara Fenwick and associated entities had been formally expanded. Helen Kowalski's case was proceeding. 3 other affected property owners had come forward as a result of the investigation widening. My documentation had, as the investigator put it, provided critical connective tissue between incidents that had looked unrelated. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the porch and looked at the field for a while after I hung up. I have had people tell me, over the years, that at a certain point a woman alone in a big house becomes a kind of invitation. That people look at the size of what you've built and the quietness of your life, and they read it as vulnerability. An opening. What I would like to say to those people, and to every woman who has sat across from someone friendly and helpful and full of concern for her well-being and thought, "Something about this doesn't quite add up," is this: your instincts are not nothing. The thing you notice and don't say anything about yet. The word someone uses that's slightly off. The question that sounds like caring but lands like calculating. Those are data. Collect them. And if someone tells you what you have is more than you need, more than you can manage, more than is sensible at your age and your stage, remember that they are describing what they want, not what is true. I am 54 years old. I own a farmhouse in Prince Edward County with wide plank floors and a porch that catches the evening light, and on most nights I stand on that porch with a glass of wine and watch the sun go down over the field. And it is mine in the way that things are only yours when you have earned them through your own effort, and your own clarity, and your own refusal to hand them to the first person who asks nicely. Stay with me here on Nova Payback, because there are more stories to tell, and more women who need to hear that being on your own is not the same as being unprotected. If you know someone who needs this today, please share it. I'll see you in the next one.